Pleased to be joined on the Celebrity Hotline by my man Joe Lull at Real Joe Lull on X, retired Cleveland sports talk host, Ombudsman Emeritus. Joe Lull, thank you so much for taking the time on this Friday.
Dennis, thanks for the invite, my friend.
All right, Joe, the reason I'm having you on is the reason I had you on the last time, because you have cut through the clutter in this Browns stadium fight, and you have crystallized it to me, and you were the first who I knew of. Maybe there were others, but I think you were the first to ask the question of, to what extent is Dan Gilbert and Dan Gilbert's enterprise leaning into the city and the county against Haslam? And you came out with a tour de force piece today, or I think you might have been published yesterday, on medium.com/@joe.lull. Just summarize the piece that you wrote, and it's a bunch of questions, but summarize it for us.
Well, Dennis, I think we've been gaslighted by the leadership in town throughout this entire process, specifically right at the front, County Executive Chris Ronayne, and right alongside him, Mayor Bibb, because I don't think we've had a genuine discussion about the benefits of the stadium as it stands on the lakefront, what is lost if it moves from the lakefront, in actual specific, tangible terms. So we hear all of this, thematic talk about bottoming out the urban core and not supporting the momentum in Cleveland. And I want to know flat out, what does that stadium do economically for the businesses, the few that surround it downtown? We talk about the bars and restaurants. And the reality is the closest bars and restaurants to the existing facility that our leaders want to put lipstick on the pig, they're a 15-minute walk uphill. So how much of a impact does that facility really have on the bars and restaurants? They talk about connectivity with the Huntington Bank, the Huntington Convention Center, the Great Lakes Science Center, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Let me ask you, how many people do you know that go to a Browns home game or a concert or a high school football game or any of the maybe 18 events that they have at that facility per year, and then go to the Science Center before or after, or go to the Rock Hall before or after, or in some way have it tied to the Convention Center? It's nonsensical. And they keep speaking in these generalities about the effect that building has and the Browns' presence has on the greater downtown. And where I think we're missing, or what I've tried to point out, is I don't think it has anything to do with the way things are today and the impact that stadium has on today. I think this has all been about one thing from the very get-go, and that's the threat that the Browns moving to Brook Park and the development in Brook Park, as well as the subsequent doubling of the land available for a lakefront development. They're going to develop the Portland north of the stadium no matter what. But if that stadium goes away, the amount of acreage you have to develop has now doubled. You have those two developments, Brook Park and prime lakefront real estate, where you knock down the stadium and have some 70 acres. What does that do to the $3.5 billion Cuyahoga Riverfront master plan that is currently being anchored by a Cavaliers practice facility, and which is completely run, and of course, at the behest of Bedrock, Dan Gilbert's real estate firm. So I have nothing against Bedrock, by the way, and I think it's amazing that they want to develop the riverfront. Yeah, it's great. But the question where I think our leaders are right now is they're protecting that investment. They're protecting Dan Gilbert. They are choosing one billionaire over another billionaire by saying, we've got this riverfront. They're not saying it out loud, of course, but we've got this riverfront master plan that's in the works, $3.5 billion and tax increment financing. And they're all going to have office buildings and condos and retail and restaurants. Well, what do you think the Brook Park plan will be? What do you think the lakefront is going to be, whether it's 34 acres on the Portland or whether it's 70 acres if you knock the stadium down? It's the exact same kind of development. And if you put those three against each other, if all three are built, I don't know that the city can support all three. And I would venture to say the one that really probably shouldn't be built is the one on the river where there's currently next to no activity whatsoever.
Talking with Joe Lull, and yeah, I mean, you summarized what you wrote so well. And that's the thing. I don't have anything against Gilbert and his crew, neither do you, but we haven't gotten sufficient answers as to exactly why. And this is what originally, I think, prompted you to get in touch with me a while ago. Why it would be, or how it would be, that the city and the county are in lockstep when Brook Park is in Cuyahoga County. And you came to the conclusion that the only way that's possible is if there's another force that's pushing them together. Have you, in the final 90 seconds we have with you, Joe, any evidence that you weren't right all along, that this is essentially Gilbert versus Haslam for the entertainment dollar of Northeast Ohio?
Dennis, I don't have any facts here. I am just asking the questions and using deductive logic. And I also find it interesting, you could not watch a Cavaliers game on FanDuel Sports this year without that commercial airing that made us all aware of the fact that Quicken Loans Arena was celebrating, or Quicken Arena, whatever it is now,
Rocket Arena.
Celebrating 30 years, Rocket Arena, in the 30 years in the heart of downtown Cleveland. To me, that was kind of like an in-your-face, hey, we're downtown, we've been here, we're staying here, and they have the right to have, pushed their own positive PR. But the Cavaliers, Gilbert, they've been conspicuously quiet throughout all of this. And I just find it very interesting because I can't find a logical argument for why the city and the county would be so vehemently against this based on what we have in place today. But the reality is this $3.5 billion riverfront development is in the works. They've already passed the tax increment financing. And, let me leave you with this. Someone that you know pretty well, Brent Larkin, former editorial director of the Plain Dealer, he wrote in Sunday's Plain Dealer that among some who genuinely care about Cleveland exists a fear the Haslam project could do enough harm to downtown that it leads to a downsizing of the Bedrock development. So local leaders today better be careful not to sign a downtown death warrant dated 2035 or beyond. How is that stadium leaving signing a death warrant for downtown? I don't think it has anything to do with that. It has the fact that this Bedrock development, if they suddenly have competition in Brook Park and twice competition on the lake, their prospects aren't quite as rosy as they've made them seem thus far.
Joe Lull, the Ombudsman Emeritus, Cleveland Sports, thank you so much for checking in. I really appreciate it, and we'll keep calling your number as this thing continues to unfold.
I appreciate it, Dennis, and I hope, the media has done a nice job on this, but I really hope they drill down with our leaders on this question of why they are opposing it, who's behind the opposition, and drill down on this question about competition that we seem to be squelching by going against this Browns plan.
Absolutely. Joe Lull, the one and only, checking in with us on the Bloom Daddy Show. We'll be pleased to be joined on the Celebrity Hotline by my man Joe Lull at Real Joe Lull on X, retired Cleveland Sports Talk host, Ombudsman Emeritus. Joe Lull, thank you so much for taking the time on this Friday.
Dennis, thanks for the invite, my friend.